Isn't it a curious thing how a moment arrives in the river of life, when you find you are no longer swimming with the current, but observing its flow? The great play of the world continues, its music and lights still dance, yet you have taken a gentle step back into the quiet audience of your own awareness. You are listening to the music, not just being moved by its rhythm. And then, a realization dawns. A quiet bell has chimed within, signaling that the dream is beginning to fade. Now this awakening is not some sudden thunderclap from on high. It is more like the soft stirring in a silent theater after the film has run its course. The credits have faded, the seats are empty, and you suddenly see that the grand story was a magnificent play of light and shadow, a projection on a screen. So deeply compelling, yet a flickering image all the same. And in that moment of seeing, the music of the world begins to sound different. The familiar voices of friends, of companions, of lovers, may start to resonate at a slightly different pitch. Not discordant, you see, but simply tuned to a song whose words you no longer quite remember. The laughter reaches you, but its echo feels distant. You see the roles being played in every conversation. And here, we come to a delicate point in the dance. For once you begin to see the play for what it is, you must also learn to choose your fellow audience with a quiet wisdom. This is not a matter of feeling superior, not at all. It is simply a need to keep the waters of your own perception clear. For there are some, you see, whose own deep sleep creates a current, a gentle but persistent tide that can pull you back into the very dream from which you are just beginning to stir. This is the first art of awakening. To understand that true love is not always found in proximity, and that deep compassion can be a silent, watchful presence. And so, let us consider a gentle inquiry into the 5 energies from which one might lovingly step away. This is not a list of rules carved in stone, nor a judgment of others. See it, rather, as the art of tending to a small inner flame in a world of many winds. For as the light within you grows, you come to see that this dance of life is not a battle against the dark, but a gentle cupping of the hands around a precious light. And this light is often best protected not with loud declarations, nor with argument, but with the simple, silent grace of turning to walk your own path. And so, let us turn our attention to the first pattern of being you must learn to recognize. The first is the soul I would call the sleeper, who insists that you are the one who is lost in a dream. You see, there are those who have woven their entire sense of self around the notion that this world is precisely as it appears on the surface. Their comfort is rooted in certainty. The rules of the game are fixed, the meanings already decided, and everything must be filed away in its proper box, like memories in a dusty attic. They find solace in conclusions, but a deep anxiety in the spaciousness of questions. So when you begin to speak of life as a kind of flowing music, of realizing that the self is not a thing apart, but is the universe itself looking out from behind your eyes, well, it tends to rattle the teacups on their shelves. To them, it sounds like a beautiful sort of madness. And because it does, they will try, with genuine kindness, to tuck you back into the comfortable warmth of their shared consensus. Be realistic, they will say. Come back to earth. Don't think so much. But what they are truly saying is, come back to the harbor where we all agree on the map, where we pretend to know the destination. Isn't it a curious paradox, how unsettled some can be by the freedom of another? It is as if one who is still dreaming resents the person who has risen and opened the window to the morning air. The light is too brilliant, the breeze too fresh, and so they might call you strange, or confused, or even self-important. Anything at all to keep the curtains drawn. Now, you must see this clearly. There is no need for argument. The very moment you try to prove that you are awake, you have already begun to fall back into slumber. The truly awakened have no position to defend. For truth, you see, is much like the wind. It cannot be captured in a fist. So what is to be done with these dear souls? You simply offer an inward bow of compassion. Let them enjoy their dream until they themselves are ready to stir. And you just quietly keep your eyes open. You do not need to convince anyone of the clarity of your vision. Simply embody it. Let it be a quiet hum in the background of your being, once you stop explaining the sunrise to those who still face west. Your own inner quietude will deepen. You will cease to pour your precious wine into leaking cups. And in that, you will find that silence becomes your most eloquent expression. Not the silence of withdrawal, but the vast, knowing silence of a clear sky. And so, once you have learned to step gently away from the sleeper who insists you are dreaming, you will perceive another kind of presence, subtler and altogether more alluring. Ah, yes, the second kind. This one is a far trickier dance because, unlike the first, this person appears to be fully awake. They speak the familiar language of the path, energy, vibration, oneness. They echo the ancient texts and speak of consciousness, perhaps with a wisp of incense and a knowing namaste. But if you listen quietly, their awakening is a reflection in the mirror of the self. These are the actors in the play of spirituality. They wear enlightenment not as skin, but as a fine costume to be admired. And in the stillness between their words, you can feel it, a subtle undercurrent of measurement. The game is not about truth, but who has journeyed further into the mystery. And isn't that a marvelous joke? To take a ruler to the boundless ocean, to turn this great flowing dance into a race, a sprint towards a finish line called no self. You will recognize them without effort. Every meeting of minds becomes a quiet tournament of spirit. If you have found peace, their peace is somehow deeper. If you whisper, their whisper is like a falling leaf, as if the great reality were a secret to be guarded. They mean well, of course, but the ego, that clever old actor, has simply changed its wardrobe and learned a few new lines. It is as if the self slipped in through the garden gate and declared itself the master of the house. And the real mischief in this, you see, is not that they might deceive you. It is the subtle invitation for you to join them on the stage. And so you begin to wonder, am I playing my part correctly? Is my stillness silent enough? Should I capture this moment for others to see? And just like that, the boundless mystery is reduced to a portrait in a frame. But true awakening has no concern for appearances. It is as wonderfully plain as the feeling of breath, as beautifully simple as washing a bowl. This quietness does not need to advertise its presence. It simply is. And so, the wise way to be with such people is to offer a gentle smile and let your own silence be your cloak. Do not pull at their mask. It will dissolve in time. But do not linger for the second act, for the game of comparison is a quiet thief of joy. It turns the silent temple of being into a noisy marketplace. You see, this awakened life is not a brand to be sold. It is the deep relief of putting all brands down. It is not about feeling superior to those who are still dreaming. It is the realization that there is no superior at all. Now then, after you have seen the play and recognized the performers, you will encounter another kind of energy. One who does not perform or compete, yet can quietly leave the air in the room feeling thin. This third pattern to observe from a distance is what we might call the soul who thirsts, wrapped in a cloak of endless need. You see, awakening softens you. It makes you porous, exquisitely tender to the currents of life. You begin to feel the tides of others' sorrow as if they were your own. The subtle tremors of the world, the silent sorrow that echoes beneath casual words. And because of this openness, there is always the possibility of becoming a gathering place for those who draw upon light, often without knowing it. These are not malicious souls. No more than a moth is malicious for seeking a flame. But you see, if you allow every moth to dance within your lantern, the light itself will soon begin to wane. Now, the one who drains the spirit does so with a subtle grace. They appear with tales that flow like rivers with no sea, with wounds that they cherish, and dramas that spin like a familiar, sorrowful song. They will say, "You see me in a way that no one else does." And perhaps this is true. But you see, to witness something is not the same as to become it. Isn't it a curious thing, how compassion, when left untended, can blossom into a form of servitude? You begin to believe that to love is to always agree, that the spiritual path is one of endless availability. But real love, you see, is not a blind generosity. It is a discerning warmth. It knows the rhythm of embrace and the wisdom of stepping back into silence. When you are in the presence of such energies, notice the feeling in your own being. Do you feel expanded or diminished, serene or subtly compressed? Your body is an ancient instrument. It knows the music long before the mind names the tune. The soul has its own immune system, and a deep weariness is its fever. And so the most deeply compassionate gift you can offer is not rejection, but a gentle refusal. A refusal that says, "I cannot help you find your light by allowing you to extinguish mine." That is the dance of love wearing the quiet armor of wisdom. Now, be wary of turning this into a new game of separating the world into saints and sinners. That is just another costume for the ego. Instead, learn the fine art of distance, the sacredness of the pause, the power of a gentle no. You see, if you wish to continue walking in the light, you cannot carry all those who have grown comfortable in the shade. Sometimes you must leave them to their own unlit candle, not from a place of coldness, but from a place of trust that they too will one day find their own spark. And once you have learned this delicate balance between an open heart and a protected spirit, you will surely meet the fourth kind. And this one is perhaps the most subtle of all, for they do not hide in the dark, but in the bright costume of reason. And so, the fourth kind of person to be mindful of after awakening is the rational cynic. The one who has mistaken their skepticism for wisdom and their own confusion for a kind of depth. You see, awakening is not a war against reason. It is reason learning to smile at its own reflection. But the cynic, bless his heart, takes the mind far too seriously, carrying it like a sharpened sword, slashing at the great mystery until all that remains is the dust of explanation. He is the one who hears a bird's song and asks to see its formal qualifications. This soul cannot bear the open sky of uncertainty, so he armors himself in the cold steel of his own logic. He will reduce the poetry of love to mere chemistry and the miracle of beauty to a biological function, the spirit into a quaint superstition. And while he professes to seek truth, what he truly craves is the comfort of control, the safety of a world fully explained, the quiet of absolute certainty. And here is the paradox. Isn't it a curious thing? The cynic is merely a disappointed dreamer, a soul that once hoped with the vastness of the sea, felt the pain of the tide receding, and chose to remain on the dry land of disbelief. So he mocks your wonder, not because it is false, but because it is a painful echo of a world he has lost. And if you remain too long in the orbit of such a mind, you may find your own inner light beginning to flicker. He will teach you that to feel beauty is to be naive, that to trust the river of life is foolish, and to dance simply for the joy of it is a form of madness. You start to fold your own being to fit the cramped cage of his reason until you forget you have wings and that they were meant for soaring, not for dissection. The wisest path, then, is not to argue. One does not try to convince the cynic of the mystery. It is like describing the ocean to a wave. Simply smile. acknowledge his cleverness, and walk on. The universe requires no defense. In the great play of existence, reason is a tool, not the king. It is here to serve awareness, not to sit upon its throne. To awaken is to hear the laughter behind the logic, to embrace the cosmic riddle that is not meant to be solved, but only to be lived. So, dear friend, guard your sense of wonder as if it were a fragile flame. Keep it bright and free from the settling dust of cynicism. Because when that flame of wonder dies, wisdom itself turns to cold ash. And once you have learned to pass the cynic with your laughter still alive, you will encounter the fifth kind of soul, perhaps the most enchanting illusion of them all, the rescuer of souls. The fifth kind, the would-be savior. This is the one who offers to carry everyone's burdens and in doing so, quietly nourishes their own need to be indispensable. You will meet this pattern often after your own awakening, for they are drawn to your light like a ship to a distant shore. They will approach and say things like, "You were brought here to help me," or "You are the only one who could possibly understand." And perhaps there is a part of you that already knows this. But that knowing, you see, is the very current that pulls you into the trap. For the rescuer is in a dance of fixing, a rhythm of mending, of playing the hero in a story that is not their own. Their affection conceals a quiet contract. I will mend your reflection so that my own may seem complete. And if you do not watch the flow, you become a character in their perpetual drama. The shining saint, whose light becomes a beautiful prison for them to adore. Now then, the soul that begins to stir must realize this simple, profound thing. You cannot pull someone from a dream they are not yet ready to leave. Each consciousness unfolds in its own season, warmed by the very friction of its own journey. To intervene is to steal from them the priceless lesson that is the key to their own liberation. And isn't it a curious game, how the ego can wear the mask of compassion? You begin to imagine that your own inner silence depends on the quiet of others, when true peace is a spring that overflows only when you cease to dam it. The sun does not chase the shadows away. It simply is, and the darkness recedes in its own time. So when you encounter this rescuer in the world, or more importantly, when you feel that same impulse stir within your own being, simply bow to it and release the tide. This universe does not ask for a savior. It asks for witnesses. Be the one who sees, not the one who grasps. And in this, perhaps we find the true nature of the space that appears after awakening. It is not a turning away in rejection, nor in superiority, but a turning toward a pristine clarity. For some currents will pull you back into the dream of comparison, and others into the mist of their own wanting, and still others into a labyrinth of words. Allow them all to flow, and remain rooted in the silent earth of your own being, knowing that every wave is exactly where it must be in the great ocean. When you cease the effort of saving, of convincing, of proving, awakening is no longer an event you passed through, but becomes the very rhythm of your breath, a quiet awareness that moves through the bustling marketplace with a gentle smile for the grand illusion, but never for a moment confusing the dream for your true home. So now, take a breath. The play goes on, but you are finally free to forget your old lines. Music.